which is even better. Am I right? Dude, that's what I'm talking about. Jenna's the only one that doesn't think so. But she knows, I mean, I'm sure she thinks, I hope she thinks I'm pretty cool. I really hope she does. So it's sweet to be up here with you guys. Brandon asked me to share, and I got to share with you guys a little bit of something that I've been studying recently, and it's super cool. I'm super pumped to share this with you guys because I think it's one of the most important things there is. It's very, 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 very important. It is so important because it's a subject where the people that have gone through it is a subject that either brings you to the closest point in your relationship with God that you've ever been, or it pushes you away from God altogether. It's two sides of a coin. It's a double-edged sword. It has simultaneously brought the most people closest in their faith with God, as well as pushed the most people away from their faith entirely. And the subject we're going to be talking about is a thing I call adversity. Adversity is just kind of a fancy word for suffering or pain. So we're going to be talking about adversity. That is the coin or the double-edged sword that we're going to be talking about. And when we're talking about adversity, it's really hard not to go to the book in the Bible that we are going to go to study adversity. Adversity is just in this book, in the book of Job, we're going to find out that, I mean, maybe some of you guys know the story of Job. Maybe some of you don't, but you guys will find out why the subject of adversity comes up so much in the book of Job. And me, I love stories. I love talking about stories. I love reading stories. I love watching stories on the movie screen. I love playing stories in video games. I love stories. And so that's why I'm stoked that I get to share the story of Job with you, because Job is a story, and I love hearing stories, and I love telling stories. So I say that we just get straight into the story. So if you guys have your Bibles, you can open up to Job chapter 1, because we're going to be in Job most of the night. And but without further ado, I really just want to get into the story. So here we go. Job 1:1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. We'll stop right there. There's this dude Job, lives in the land of Uz, and he is a blameless, upright dude, fears God. This dude is super righteous, righteous enough that it's written about him in the Bible. So like, this dude was legit, super righteous, always followed God. Let's go on. Verse 2. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. So we know that Job was a super righteous dude, and we know that he has an awesome big family. It said 7 sons and 3 daughters. Then it said a bunch of things about like thousands of sheep and oxen, donkeys. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but back in Job's culture, in Job's time period, they didn't have dollar bills, they didn't have pesos, they didn't have rupees, they didn't have whatever other kinds of money there is. They didn't have dollar bills, they didn't have coins. So the way that they bought their new iPhone 6s or their PS4s or those sweet pair of Nike SB Dunks or whatever it was they went to buy in those days, they would go and they would trade them like 30 sheep or maybe 50 oxen or whatever it is, depending on the thing. And so that was how money and wealth was measured in that day, was through livestock and possessions and stuff. And so this dude, Job, he's super rich. He has like 7,000 sheep, a bunch of oxen, a bunch of like stuff. He's rich. He's a rich dude. So there's a couple of things we know about Job. He is a righteous dude. Righteous dude. Just thought of that. He was a righteous dude, and he had an awesome family. He had 7 sons, 3 daughters, and he was super rich. Now this sounds like the opposite of adversity, actually. This is what I call prosperity. Job was living in a very prosperous life. He was super prosperous. I couldn't think of another word. Prosperous, very prosperous life. So, and prosperity is the opposite of adversity. But in a second, we're going to see something that happens to Job. We're going to skip down to verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" As if God didn't know. I think it was kind of a rhetorical question. Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." Basically, Satan saying, none of your business, okay? I was on planet Earth somewhere. And then he goes on in verse 8. And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil?" He's saying, dude, check out Job. This dude's the sickest. He's the most righteous. And then in verse 9, then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house, and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face." So Satan's basically saying, man, of course Job follows you. He's going to follow you. You've given him everything. You've protected him. You've given him all that sheep. He's a rich dude, has an awesome family. If that keeps going on, of course he's going to follow you. Why wouldn't he? And then he says, but if you take that all away, if you hurt him, if you take that all away, he will curse you to your face. I don't think Job is quite as righteous a dude as you think. And then God answers. Verse 12, and the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your hand." And right there, real quick, we're going to come back to it later, but the Lord said to Satan, all that he has is in your hands. So God was not the one that did whatever is about to happen to him. It was Satan. He said, "Satan, you can do it. It's in your hands. And only against him do not stretch out your hand." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Now, verse 13, now there was a day when his sons and daughters, this is talking about Job, now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. It was a super awesome day. They're just kind of enjoying it, living it up. It's probably like Thanksgiving. They're all just like happy family. They pass the cranberry sauce, like, give me some of those green beans. And then in verse 14, and there came a messenger to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing, and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans fell upon them and took them and struck down the servants in the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." So this servant comes up, and he's like, basically, he says, a bunch of your servants and a bunch of your cattle died, and so that's like probably a fourth of your fortune, but you're still pretty rich, so that's okay. And but then it goes on. Here we go in verse 16. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, "The fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you." And while he was yet speaking, there came another. Sorry, I kind of lost my place. There came another and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." So these 3 guys have just come to Job and told him, basically, you're now flat broke. You've lost all of your wealth and all of your possessions. I'm sorry, but as if it couldn't get any worse. In verse 18, while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, "Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they're dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you." And so Job has gone from this awesome life of prosperity to he's literally lost all of his wealth, and all of his sons and daughters just died. He just got flipped over. His whole world got turned upside down. He just lost everything. And I don't know about you, but I don't know what I would be thinking at that time. And I imagine like one of my first questions would be like, why God? Why me? And I just probably go, punch something, I'd try and take it out on someone else. I don't know what I would do, but man, what Job does is one of the craziest things I've ever heard of. It is honestly in my top 10 like most crazy Bible verses ever, because what Job does next is just unthinkable. In verse 20, then Job arose and tore his robe, shaved his head, and fell on the ground. And wait. So he tore his robe, shaved his head, and those were standard forms of grieving in that day. So we knew he's grieving, he's sad. But this next part, he tore his robe, shaved his head, and he fell on the ground, right here, and worshiped. He fell on the ground and worshiped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. The Lord, in all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. But right there, right after he found out that he's lost everything, he's lost his whole fortune, all of his sons and daughters, he falls to his knees and worships. That is nuts. That is one of the craziest things I've ever heard. That in that instance, that is the last thing I would have ever thought to do. The last thing I would have ever thought to do. And I'm sure you guys could relate to me, because if we had lost all of that, it doesn't go like that. We don't look to God. We usually get angry at him or something. And that was why it is so crazy. And I'm left wondering, how could Job have possibly done that? How could he go through all this adversity and then just worship God? And that is a little bit about what we're going to be looking at tonight. And listen, that is just chapter 1. We just finished chapter 1 of Job. There's 41 more chapters in this book. You guys need to go home and read some Job, okay? Because this book is incredible. Now we're going to move on to chapter 2. We don't have time to read the entire book of Job, so I'm going to kind of summarize it for you guys. I hope you're okay with that. So in chapter 2, Satan is like, well, that wasn't enough. He's not cursing God yet. And so he's like, all right, well, I got to do something even worse. So Satan, he's like, how about we give him a bunch of itchy, nasty, gross, painful sores all over his body? And then that happens, and Job's like, oh! It's like, I imagine it's like one of those cartoon things where the cartoon character just had a really cruddy day, and they're like, it can't possibly get any worse, and then like, lightning, and then it starts raining, and they're like, of course. And so it gets worse for Job. He gets these, gross, nasty sores, finds a clay pot, breaks off a shard, and starts scratching himself. And then he's just had the cruddiest day of his life. He goes home, he plops down on his couch, and I'm sure he's thinking, like, I'm done. And I know you guys have probably had those days, because I've had those days where you just go home and you're like, I'm done. I just don't want to do anything. And then inevitably, your mom or dad asks you to take out the trash or do the dishes, and you're like, oh. But you have to do them, otherwise they'll take your cell phone away. And yeah, I know, it's the worst. But I pay for my own cell phone now, so I can do the dishes whenever I want. But I do them right when I'm done with them. It's the best way to do it. So yeah, and he goes home, and he's just done. His wife walks in the room, and he's like, oh, thank goodness, my wife's here. She's going to comfort me. She's going to help me get through this hard time. And this is the first thing that she says to him. Curse God and die. What? Come on, man. You're my wife. You're supposed to love me. Curse God and die. She's like, you're worthless. You're not worth anything. You've lost all your wealth. You've lost your whole family. All that God has left to do to you is kill you. So why don't you just curse him and then give him reason to kill you? Like, just curse God and die. And he's like, oh, come on, man, I cannot catch a break today. And so, but man, then his response in Job chapter 2, verse 10, he said to her, "You speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil?" And all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Job responds to her defending God's sovereignty. He's defending God. And I'm sure he's convinced God is the one that did this to him. And he's still defending him. His wife comes up. He looks to his wife. Well, she doesn't help him out. So where does he go to next? So next, he goes to his friends. He's thinking, but before we get to where his friends are, gotta preface this a little bit. What they believed back in that day in his culture was that if you were being blessed, if you had an awesome life, that means that you were following God. That means that, and the vice versa as well. If you were following God, then a prosperous life would follow. The opposite is what they believed as well. That if you had a really cruddy life, then you clearly sinned against God and were doing wrong. And if you sinned against God and were wicked, doing wrong, then you were going to have a cruddy life. The thing is, we know that that's not true. I mean, Jesus affirms that if you follow him, you're going to suffer. So we know that following God does not mean you're going to have a prosperous, awesome, super cool life. But that is wholeheartedly what Job, his wife, his sons and daughters, and his best friends all believed. And so Job comes up walking up to his best friends, and he's like, "Guys, I've had the cruddiest day of my life, and my wife just thinks I'm an idiot too. So I just need you guys to help me. I need you guys to just build me back up because I'm feeling super terrible." And these guys, they're his best friends, they start accusing him of doing evil because, like I said, they believe that if you had a really cruddy life, you clearly sinned and were doing wicked things. And so they were like, "Yeah, well, it's your fault. Basically, you're the reason that this happened." I mean, this is a couple of the things that they said. Job 22:5, "Is not your evil abundant? There is no end to your iniquities." Like, yeah, you're a super bad sinner, so it makes sense. Job 21:28 and 29, "The possessions of his house will be carried away, dragged off in the day of God's wrath. This is the wicked man's portion from God, the heritage decreed for him by God." This is literally what happened to Job. His house was carried away in that wind then when his sons and daughters died. And so he's saying, yeah, that happened because you're a terrible person. And in Job 22, verse 21 through 23, "Agree with God and be at peace. Thereby good will come to you. Receive instruction from his mouth and lay up his words in your heart. If you return to the Almighty, you'll be built up. If you remove injustice far from your tents." He's saying, dude, just come back to God. Repent of your sins. If you come back to God, and then he'll take care of you. You'll get your wealth back. Like, everything will be cool. As long as you come back to God, because clearly you've sinned. Clearly you've done wrong. Like, you're an evil dude. And this whole time, actually, this is most of the book of Job, is his friends accusing him and him defending himself and God and being like, "Guys, I didn't even do anything. I have no idea what you're talking about." Because like it said in verse 1 of chapter 1, he was a blameless, righteous dude. And so he goes to his wife. She doesn't help. Goes to his friends. They don't help. I mean, his only next logical step is God. He goes to God. And so he asks the question. He says, and I think this is the question that a lot of us ask when adversity comes our way. "God, why? God, why me? Why?" And that's usually our first question, but I want to bring you guys back to that place where we stopped, just a little quick pit stop that we took before in Scripture about how God let Satan be the one who afflicted him. See, I think a lot of the times, and even like Job did, we blame God for things that he didn't do. Like, he was asking God, why? Why are you doing this? And we do the same thing. God, why? Why did my parents get a divorce? And God's saying, they're the ones who got a divorce. You should ask them. Or we're saying, God, why do those kids pick on me? Or God, why this, why that? And he's saying, that's not that I gave them free will, and free will means that they have the opportunity to do good as well as do evil. And that means the evil they do can be directed towards you. So it is that person's fault. It's not God's. And that is something Job was wrestling with, and he was asking why. He was literally asking why. He said, where is it? Oh my goodness. Job 7:20. If I sin, what did I do to you, you watcher of mankind? Why have you made me your mark? Why have I become a burden to you? Why have you made me your mark? Mark, in the Hebrew, it's mifgah. Literally means an object of attack. He's saying, God, why are you attacking me? Why? And he's, again, right there, he's just blaming God for something he didn't do. God wasn't even the one who was attacking him. It was Satan. Man, and we do that so much of the time. How then? He went to his wife, he went to his friends, he went to God, and he didn't even get any answers. So how did he keep his faith? How was he able to fall on his knees and worship? I mean, that is the craziest thing, and I've been asking that question a lot, and we're actually like right there. We're right on the cusp. We're going to get that answer finally. So Job, in Job 19, verses 23 and 27, he says some super cool stuff. He kind of gives us the answer finally. So Job, see here, 19, verse 23. Job says, "Oh, that my words were written. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book." They are now. "Oh, that with an iron pen and lead they were engraved in the rock forever." So basically right there he's saying, what I'm about to say next is super duper important. Like really mega, ultra, incredibly important. And then he goes on and says it right here. Verse 25. "For I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been thus destroyed, yet in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. My heart faints within me." It says, I know that my Redeemer lives. Even though I've suffered so much, man, I know who God is. And at the last he will stand upon the earth. At the last he will stand upon the earth. And then right here, "And after my skin has been thus destroyed, yet in my flesh I shall see God." When my skin has been destroyed, after I've died, I bet you at this point, Job, he probably expected to die pretty soon because he'd suffered through everything else. And he's like, even after I died, God is going to be there and I will finally get to see him and he will vindicate me. He will know that I did not do anything to deserve all this wrath that has been poured out upon me. And he would eventually find out in heaven maybe that it was actually Satan that did that. And so he was hoping, he had a hope in eternity. That's how he did it. He knew, right here, listen up. This is important. He knew that eternity outweighed adversity. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you got a scale right here, and you got your adversity. You got, maybe your parents got a divorce. Maybe you broke your leg in the middle of a sports season. Maybe, like, whatever it is, the death of a loved one. You got all your adversity up on this side. And, you put your adversity and it shifts the scale a bit. But then you got eternity over here. And once you you're kind of dangling it over. Once you put eternity on, well, bam, that scale just rocks to the ground. All the other stuff launches off. He knew that eternity outweighed adversity, and that's what he was looking to. He was looking to eternity because, well, he had no hope in this present world, pretty much, because he had lost everything. But he knew that eternity outweighed adversity. And man, that is how he did it. He knew that eternity outweighed adversity. He was looking to God. He was looking to after he died. And I think even because of that, he was able to be honest with God. He was able to be I mean honest with God. I mean like brutally honest. Like sometimes we think we can't be honest with God. Like, oh, you can't say that to God. He'll like smite you or something. Whatever that means. He's going to smite you. And so we think we can't be honest with God. But no, he was brutally honest with God because he knew that the eternity that he would have, the rewards that he would have, outweighed the current adversity, man, he was honest with God. Like, this is what he said, Job 7:11. Therefore, I will not restrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my heart, and I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. He was saying, God, I'm not going to hold any punches. I'm not really liking you right now. It's a pretty terrible day, and like, I'm pretty sure it's your fault. So like, what in the world? Like, he would complain to God. He also defended God's like majesty and justice. So he was having this battle inside him, but he was honest with God. And I think sometimes we really got to do that when we face adversity. And moving on, there's a subject that I think sometimes we just brush under the rug. And it's that the fact of eternity outweighing adversity is because in eternity, we're going to get rewards. Like, if you believe in Jesus, you're going to heaven, but we can even get rewards in heaven based on how we live our life today, based on how we followed God, even in our adversity today. And so if we're following him like Job did, if we suffer, if we face adversity, and man, we fall on our knees in worship, that is gaining us rewards in heaven. Sure, maybe we don't see the rewards here in this life, but man, in heaven, it'll all be worth it. And that is what Job knew, and that is how he was able to do that, man. And Job also knew that maybe, just maybe, in this life, God will redeem my suffering. Because he knows that suffering can be redeemed. Because in verse 20, or in chapter 23, verse 10, he says, but he knows the way that I take. When he has tried me, I shall come out as gold. And right there, he's talking about gold, and this illustration is echoed in the New Testament when gold is used as an illustration for us, because in order to get pure gold, which is what you want, right? Like, I don't want half gold, half barnacles. I want, first thing that came to my mind. I don't think I've ever seen a barnacle. But you don't want half gold, half barnacles, because barnacles aren't worth anything, right? You want pure gold, refined gold that is completely 100% pure. And in order to get pure gold, you know what you do? You have to put it over a fire and get it super duper hot so it's liquid. You got it so hot that it melts and it's in liquid form. And when that happens, all of what this thing called dross, it's the impurities, they rise up to the top, and you can scoop them off, and then underneath you got some pure gold. And then you can do that a bunch of times to get really, really super duper pure gold. And that is like the same thing that we go through. God sometimes knows that suffering is necessary for spiritual growth. And that is why I was talking about how it's a double-edged sword, two sides of the same coin. It'll either bring you so much closer to God when you face adversity, or it'll push you away from God completely. And that is up to us, because God uses suffering, God can redeem suffering, our adversity, to refine us just like that gold. But that is also up to us, because if we have to let him do it, we have to let God redeem our adversity, because that's what I said, it's two sides of the same coin. If we don't let him, we're going to be on that side that pushes us away from God. But if we let him, we're going to grow closer to God than we ever have been before. And this concept is echoed in the New Testament as well. I know we've been in Job the whole time, all Old Testament. We're going to flip over to the New Testament like for just a second. 2 Corinthians 4, 17 and 18. Oh yes, I bookmarked it. I forgot I did that. 2 Corinthians 4, 17 and 18 say, for this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. Right there at the beginning of verse 17, it says, for this light momentary affliction, that's our suffering, that's our adversity that he's talking about, is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory. And eternity outweighs adversity. It is so worth it. We're being prepared for our eternal weight of glory. Because it goes on and says, the things that are seen, the things that we see around us, our adversity even, it's temporal, it's transient. It's only here for this lifetime. That's a little bit. But the things that are unseen, which is eternity, the things that we can't see, we cannot see eternity, man, that lasts forever. And if you think about it like in kind of like an investment standpoint, if you're investing in eternity, the rewards you get, they last forever. Like if you invest in something here, it's only going to last for this lifetime. If it lasts, sometimes it's really hard for us to think about because we love instant gratification. Like if I could, when I am going to bed every night, if I could always have a bowl of Fruity Pebbles next to my bed, like every time I wanted it, that would be awesome. I might get super fat, but worth it. Because we always want to be instantly gratified, and I always have that craving when I'm going to bed, and I only indulge it sometimes. And but that eternal weight of glory, that's what we're looking towards. That is how Job was able to get on his knees, man, and worship God in light of everything that happened to him. He lost all of his wealth, lost all of his family, but man, he hoped in God. He knew there was reward waiting for him in eternity, and that is what he based his life upon. And man, I just think about like if we did that as Christians, if we honor God, if we worship him in our adversity, don't you think that people would stop in their tracks? Don't you think that people would turn their heads? Don't you think they would drop their jaw at that sight? They're thinking, man, when I face adversity, when my life sucks, I just drink until I vomit. When my life sucks, I just do these drugs. When my life sucks, I just take it out on someone else. When my life sucks, I punch a hole in the drywall. Man, but if they see us, how are they able to, they're facing adversity and they're worshiping God. How could they do that? That'll turn some heads. That'll get people thinking, man, I want some of that. That's incredible. And man, so I just pray that we could think about that, because it'll either bring you closer to God than you've ever been, or it'll push you farther away from him than you've ever been. And that's up to us and how we trust in God in our adversity. And man, if we can do that, man, that'll turn some heads. People will start to wonder, man, this Jesus thing, that is legit. So I just pray for us tonight, man, that we can take that to heart and we can do it and just think about whether we're going through adversity now or whether it comes later, that we would have that mindset that Job did and just be able to worship when that comes. Pray with me real quick. Dear God, man, I just thank you so much for High Life and all the good things we have in life, all this prosperity, but I also, man, I know there's hurt here. I know there's adversity. God, I pray that we can see you through that and worship you in our adversity, God, because we know that eternity outweighs the adversity and that you are all going to make it all worth it when we make it up to heaven with you, God. And so I pray for future adversity, that we would be able to plan ahead of how we might deal with it, God, and just think about maybe things that have happened in the past and how we haven't, done so well dealing with those with adversity. But God, I pray that we could learn from that and take it into the future and worship you.